What's up, everyone? I'm the Kaiju no Kami from the Toku and Animation News Network here at Fan Expo Denver 2023 with
Deryl Skelton.
And for those who might not know what you do, what do you do?
I mostly go to shows now, comic conventions, do sketches, and sell my work. This is my 50th year as an artist professionally, and I did a number of years starting in the early 80s, the Dallas TV show with Larry Hagman. Had a comic strip. I did the comic strip for the LA Times Syndicate, and then went to do a lot of mural work. Then I was hired by Marvel early on in the late 80s now, and then went back to the mural work, did portraiture, did animation. Then starting in 1990, started doing a lot of stuff for Marvel. Was hired by DC in '93, went over and did Star Trek Next Generation, Wonder Woman, and Prince had a comic book. When he changed his name to a symbol, he launched it in the comic book.
Oh.
And so it was an interesting experience because Prince really liked comics. And so he would call my editor quite frequently. And in the story there was a newspaper reporter, a woman newspaper reporter, and he wanted to live like Kirstie Alley. So we drew her like Kirstie Alley in spite of the fact there were no contracts or anything, but they were friends and she appeared in one of his videos, I guess. And whenever he would call, the assistant would call first. Prince will call you in 1 hour. Prince will call you in 45 minutes. Prince will call you in a half hour. Prince will call you in 15 minutes. Prince is on the line. Well, at one point, Prince had some input he wanted to put directly. So he called up my editor directly and said, "Hi, this is Prince." And my editor goes, "Yeah, right." Hung up. This happened about 3 times. The assistant calls back, "Why do you keep hanging up on Prince?"
Oh my God.
So it was fun, and he was really into it. He was kind of an action hero in the book. I didn't draw him with platform shoes. Just he could fight guys with scimitars and fly in a plane into the Middle East and crash the plane and ride on camels across the desert. Very adventuresome guy. But I didn't realize how popular Prince was with comic fans, let alone I knew the general public liked him a lot. I was really surprised this book, Rock and Roll magazines did reviews of it, and so that, and even though I didn't design the symbol at all, I was the first artist to draw Prince's symbol in the comic book, where he had his adventures and transformed himself into a symbol.
That is pretty awesome. So what was it like doing this comic strip for Dallas? Did you have to stay within the continuity of the television series, or did they give you free reign?
They had a lot of characters from it. It didn't follow the storyline from the television, but it had, elements of backstories, things that they didn't show on TV that were obviously, backstories. They didn't really contradict what was going on in the show. And it was interesting. Unlike most licensed properties, you could draw everybody that was on the show because of the way the contracts were set up. I couldn't draw the secretary. I couldn't draw the Mexican maid. I couldn't draw some ancillary characters, so I had to fill in with those. And so my wife, who's Japanese, I rounded her eyes out and turned her into a Mexican maid. And I had ex-girlfriends being JR's secretary. And at one point, there was a storyline with an international jewel thief that used to be with Elvis Presley's ex. And I couldn't use a regular reference for that. And the script said the guy wasn't too terribly handsome, so I used myself in that. And so I was making time with Lucy Ewing, and I got thrown out of Jenna's dress shop. And then my wife too, in the Star Trek Next Generation, there was a character called Lieutenant Takamura, and the guy who wrote the novels for Star Trek Next Generation also wrote most of the comic book stuff. And so I used my wife as a model for Lieutenant Takamura, and she's a regular part of the crew. Other artists have drawn her. Same with Picard in flashback. Picard's first ship was Stargazer, and his number one I used as the model. A friend of mine who was an anchorman for the local NBC affiliate at the time put him in. And I noticed just recently in a Star Trek Next Generation comic book, they had a flashback in sequence, and I put my friend Dave in there like, I don't know, 30 years ago, and the character is still around. So it's funny, I've designed some of the crew of the Enterprise that's still being used. So that was fun. So, and my kids have been in it. Different friends have sat next to Data's station on the ship. And so in my family, we're nice. When you say see in funny papers, we really mean it.
Did you decide from the start that you wanted to get into comics, or was this something that happened over your lifetime?
It started when I was 4 years old. Zorro was on TV. Loved the show. And back then there was no streaming, no DVDs, nothing. And so the only way to see the TV show again was to wait for either summer reruns or get a comic book. And my mom got a Zorro comic book. Years later, it was drawn by Alex Toth. I didn't know the name at the time. But the idea of the illusion of movement across the page. And Toth was doing the first season, so the episodes were in order. And so I was familiar with the story. But it was very odd to see it in color. The inside of Zorro's cape was red, which didn't seem right, but it worked. But I just saw the idea that he was recreating the show, and he was working from the scripts from the show. So I was familiar with the story, but the idea that he would vary his camera angles and his shots and the lighting, it would replicate the feeling of the show on the page. And I really liked that. So I started drawing my own comic strips. Superman was a favorite show of mine at the time. And at the end of the show, they would always say, Superman appears as the character in Superman magazine. So I wanted my mom to get Superman magazine. I thought it was like Life magazine, big full color photos, And it was a comic book, what's this? And so I just more and more got into comics. And at a young age even, certain creators would really grab my attention. And so I got into Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby and a lot of the others, Dick Sprang. You didn't know their names at the time because they didn't really get credits early on. But I picked out styles I really liked, and that got me into wanting to copy them. But it led into creating for myself an amalgam of all those things. And so every once in a while, even now, if I look at my drawings, I'll think, oh, this is the kind of hand that so-and-so would draw. My cartoon ears look like artist Don Martin's cartoon ears. I just kind of smushed everything into my own style.
And you said that you were one of the first ones to get into Spider-Man who wore a costume before, when everyone was like, what's that, right?
Yeah, I was 10 years old. And Spider-Man had come out the year before, Amazing Fantasy 15. And I really liked the costume. And my mom sewed a lot, and so I learned how to sew a little bit. And I made myself a Spider-Man costume. The mask, to have the eyes be white, I put in white paper and put two little pinholes to look out of. Went door to door, and the question is always, well, who are you supposed to be? Spider-Man. Spider-Man, never heard of him. And it was kind of disheartening at the time, but Spider-Man has since caught on.
Did you include the web wings in your costume?
Not under the arms, no. My sewing skills were limited, but I was happy I got the mask. And I had a red rubber band that I put underneath to have the mask form-fitting, and so that was my Spider-Man experience.
Is there a piece of work that you have done that you are most proud about?
Ooh, good question. A lot of times it's what I would be currently working on. It's hard to name a favorite. First, at this convention I did, I think what made it a favorite at this convention was somebody had me do a cover sketch on a flash blank cover. And it was different in the sense that it was all red. So I had to do the cover all red, and so I had to kind of work in reverse using thickened watercolor. And that's one thing I like. I'm nearly 70 years old, and I'm still finding myself confronted with new things to do. I do a lot of digital work on the Cintiq tablet. About 5 years ago, I discovered the comic markers, and then these cover variant sketches. I like the challenge of doing something different, and it's tempting. Other artists I've seen do this, where you have like a stock Batman profile, and you just do that sketch quickly, you print it out, and you get the money. But I like the idea of getting something different every time and trying to think of something that's really unique for that person. Because when I'm long gone, there will be pieces out there that I'll be very proud of that are unique that no one else will have. So, I have favorite things that I've done, stories. Probably the first story that was printed by DC Comics was a Western called Jericho Pine. And I used some of my friends for the models in the story, but it had all kinds of historical references, like to the Reno Truckee Railroad. I had references for that, did the research, and made sure everything was quite accurate historically. And so I was really proud of that. And that was my first job, and so as things go along, you do something that really challenges you, and if you meet the challenge, it's your favorite piece of the time.
And you had said that you had an interesting Flash story of the one time you got to draw him.
Yeah, it was Carmine Infantino's Flash was one of those things that visually I found very compelling. He gave the illusion of super speed really well by doing multiple figures and speed lines and so on. And I was working on an issue of Wonder Woman, and the Flash was going to be the guest star. And I thought, oh boy, I get to draw the Flash. And I read the script, and I think I have it here even, the book, and in the comic, I was chagrined to see that the Flash didn't move the entire issue on his own. He's laying on the ground as sprinkler systems come down, putting water on him. He's held up by the villain after he's on the ground there. I think on the big poster there's an image of Wonder Woman carrying the Flash. And so he was unconscious the entire issue and didn't say a word, let alone move at super speed. So I was very disappointed. Until later on I thought, of all the arcs that have ever drawn for DC Comics where the Flash is published in the story, I'm the only guy that has ever drawn never moving on his own. So that's my legacy with the Flash.
That's a true accomplishment, though. I mean, not many people get to say, "Yeah, I got to draw Flash knocked out."
Yeah, I know. And even the expression on his face was pretty much the same. But that's the way it goes. But that's my legacy.
Now, have you seen? Being that you've been in the industry for 50 years, you must have seen it go from when you were drawing it by hand to modern now with digital.
Yeah, and I'm the perfect age, in my opinion, for that sort of thing. Because today, a lot of the kids doing digital work, they've learned on the computer. They have programs, they know the shortcut keys in and out. By the time I started using the computer and doing the digital work, I was far too old to learn all of that. So I just treated it like a canvas like I would anything else. I'm probably slower than the young people on that because I don't know all the shortcuts. But my work is indistinguishable when it's printed from digital to the more traditional stuff. Yeah, and so I'm kind of proud of that because I was hired by the Brendan Palms Theaters in Las Vegas. They used to have movie premieres, and they would have me do a poster for each premiere and bring in one of the minor stars of the movies to sit with me and sign them at the theaters. And so when I first started on this, I was going to do the posters like I traditionally would. I would do things in watercolor and then scan it into the computer, assemble it, and use a photo retouch program to kind of assemble it. Well, at the time, my mom was in the hospital when I was doing the first movie, and I was doing my digital comp on the computer, getting ready to do the watercolors and everything. And as it turned out, she was in the hospital longer than expected. And so I couldn't bring in all my my boards and paints and everything in there. So I just continued on my laptop to do this. And I realized the way the deadline was working out, I wasn't going to make it. So I had this program called Pro Photo Paint. I completed the poster, but it kind of painted me into a corner because every movie would have to have the same look. So I was forced into doing all the posters on the computer. Well, when I completed all 4 posters, if you put them together, you get an Avengers poster, where all the elements in the background go together. And so I was at a First Friday event and had all 4 posters assembled, put together. Somebody came by and they said, well, what program did you do this in? And I said, Pro Photo Paint. And they said, well, you can't do that. Why not? Well, it's a photo retouch program. You just can't do that. Well, I didn't know any better. I treated it like a regular painting. I mixed my colors as I would if I did it non-digitally. And it worked out just great. But that's where I learned that the computer age, kids that have grown up in the computer age, to them, you follow these program instructions. You do this, you do that. While I was too ignorant to know that. And so just like the bumblebee that can't fly, I did the poster.
Did they still use it though?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I have switched over to some other programs, but I learned from reading comments that people who are using it that I'm still not doing it the right way.
Yeah.
So I'm very happily in my ignorance to continue doing
Well,
this.
as one author I interviewed earlier said that you would have 100 people read your work, look at your work, and there'll always be that one person that will hate it, and they'll be the most vocal of it.
Oh yeah. Well, thankfully, that person I haven't seen since that First Friday event, and so unless he wanders around the convention, no one will know that I'm doing this the wrong way.
Now, when you did the Silver Surfer comics, did you find yourself needing to live up to Jack Kirby's legacy, or did you just go ahead and just care about your own thing?
I think I liked the Kirby dynamics, but my style is more realistic somewhat, I think. And as much as I admire Jack's work, I would not try to emulate that too much. There are times like I was at a convention last month where somebody wanted me to draw the Beast from the X-Men and they wanted it in the Kirby style, and I gladly complied because I love doing that. But in the Silver Surfer comic, to do the Surfer in the Kirby style and have all the ancillary characters be in my style would have been a bit jarring. But yeah, the dynamics, the idea of the Silver Surfer coming at you, and the idea of space being warped around him as he zooms around, I had Jack very much in my mind.
What type of advice would you give to students who want to do something but they're afraid to fail?
Ooh, do it all the time anyway. I mentioned doing the Flash sketch here that I'd never done on the red cover before. The first time I ever used copic markers was years ago at a convention in Phoenix. And somebody wanted a Walking Dead cover with the Niagara character. And I just started doing it, and I realized I'm working on this, and I thought, I've never used these markers before in my life. You know, I'm working without a net. But again, everything builds up to where you are, that experience. And so I just, okay, in my mind, I'm going to treat it like watercolor. And so I did it, and I blended the things and everything. It came out, I thought, really well. And then I had people the same way who work digitally. They were saying that, well, did you use the blender, right, for these things? No, I didn't have one. Well, you have to have the blender. Well, no, I didn't. I just treated it like watercolor. And while it's wet, I blended it with other watercolor. You know? And so, don't be afraid to fail. I mean, I reached a point when I was probably about 13. I thought, I did my own SpiderMan comic for myself, and I just thought, well, this is as good as it gets. You know, I felt really proud of that. And then, you know, like a week later, you look at it, and so I did so many things on my own that by the time I was auditioning to get jobs in the comics industry, I had to do sample after sample, and you get shot down by editors, you know, a lot of times saying, no, don't do this, do that. you get some that are helpful, telling you, learn your perspective better, learn your anatomy better. And so you do that. But yeah, you're going to fail, and you're going to fail a lot. But if you learn from those failures, you get the confidence to where you're my age and you start doing things you've never done before, and you don't panic because you have these other experiences to go along with it. For instance, when I was 20, I was a fashion illustrator for a chain of stores. And I did that for 2 years, and then they found out they could use clip art and not have to use me. So I was gone, and I looked all over the place for jobs as a fashion illustrator. And while I was waiting, I went to a place that had people doing portraits, and so I went down and I did portraits. And so by the time I got the Dallas comic strip, I had to draw my fashion. I had to get likenesses from the actors on the TV show. And my portrait experience and my fashion illustration experience blended together to get me to that point. And I had, before I got the Dallas gig, I had a comic strip in a local newspaper. And when I was doing the fashion illustration, I would knock out these comics during my lunch hour. And so I learned to do it fast. And so learning to do it fast, learning to do the illustration, learning to do the likenesses, it all kind of blended together. And so I learned, and I subscribed to a Chicago newspaper because locally I didn't get the Dallas strip. And I wanted to see how it looked on the page with Mary Worth and Peanuts and everything else. And I learned by looking at that if I did a good high contrast close-up likeness of a character from the TV show, and it would be there on the funny pages, it would pop. Because people naturally, Larry Hagman at the time was a huge star. And if you look at the funnies and you would see that, I learned how to compete with other people. So all of these experiences kind of, each one built upon the other. And so by the time I was doing comics, I picked up storytelling skills, which I think is probably the most important thing. It's nice to have a good style, it's nice to have something that people can relate to. But if you know how to tell a story, if you have some shortcomings in your draftsmanship, that will be overlooked if you can grab the reader and bring them into the story.
If you had one song that you could use to describe yourself or your life, what would it be?
I'm tempted to say Batman, but greatest American hero, believe it or not. The fact that I'm able to do this stuff that I've always wanted to do. When I was growing up, you would always be asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would always, say, well, I want to draw comics. So that's what I wanted to do. I had a friend, who'd say, I want to be a cowboy. And so as I grew up, I found everybody around me had to change, life would change their plans. I just always focused on, I want to do comics. My friend who wanted to be a cowboy is still a cowboy. So 2 of us made it. Everybody else fell by the wayside because circumstances or family or whatever deterred them from what they really wanted to do, and they modified what their plans were for life. But I'm very fortunate I did make it, because if I didn't, I had no backup plan.
And that could be scary in itself.
Yes, very scary.
What social media links can people find you at?
Social media on Facebook, it's Skelton Artist or Deryl Skelton. Instagram, I'm not there as much as I want to be on Instagram because there's a lot of things, the aspect ratios to work for my work. But I'm on Twitter at Skelton Artist. I have my own website at skeltonartist.com. And I usually post where I'm going to be. You can see and buy my work there. Because of my 50th anniversary, I'm putting up little vignettes of highlights of my career. Because living in Las Vegas, I did a lot of magazine cover work, and the stars who would see it would want the originals, and so I could go to the show and go backstage afterwards. And so I got to meet Liberace and Shecky Green and Lou Rawls, just a lot of big blood, sweat, and tears. Olivia Newton, John's agent called. I don't know if I can say Bill Cosby part anymore, but he liked it. And he was very nice to my wife, so can't say anything about that. It got me a lot of notoriety among local celebrities, and that helped my confidence a lot and helped him know people. But really, over the years, the stars that I have met, for me, are like Jack Kirby in comics, Kurt Schaffenberger, Gene Colan, Jerry Robinson, all who have since passed, but spending time with them was a magnificent thing. I mean, to sit down and go to a champagne brunch with Jack Kirby and his wife was amazing, because here, being a little kid in Nebraska growing up, the idea that you get to meet your idols. And so, celebrities and actors are nice, but like I said, living in Vegas, you kind of ho-hum about it. But I'll always harken back to those other people that I grew up with. I did a poster for Stan Lee, and it's just amazing to see, because at the time when you're reading comics, it almost seems like real people didn't do these. You never see them, you just don't know. And so, fulfilling that fantasy of meeting those people and learning from them. They say don't meet your idols, but I've never really been disappointed.
That is good to hear. Any final thoughts for our viewers?
By my work, no. Just thanks for all those who do stop by. Even if you don't buy anything, it's just fun to talk to people. I spent 40 years of my life working in solitude in my room late at night, and to find out when I first was doing the movie posters, that's when I first went on tour doing conventions. And I just assumed that any of my fans would not know I was alive or be grown up or whatever. And I was really heartened to see that people have enjoyed my work. And the solitude of working late at night doesn't let me see that. And so I'm really grateful for those who stop by and chat.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Until next time, bye.